Hi there, Peter here. Today I'm going to be discussing Stellaris, a PC grand strategy game which is soon to launch onto PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. I've put about 100 hours into this game, on and off. So without further ado, let's talk Stellaris. Okay, so in Stellaris, you start and lead a interstellar civilization. It can go to war, and it can even enslave other civilizations and other races. I would say the slavery is the most mature thing in it, which is probably why it's a 7. One of the mechanics in Stellaris is that you can enslave either a caste of your own species or those of other species. Whether you can do this or not depends on your governing ethics at the time, but I'll get into that later. For a start, it doesn't handle science as one monolithic subject. It has society, biology, physics. You have separate buildings for each, separate sort of labs in space for each, and they're each used to research different technologies. Another thing that's unusual about technology in Stellaris is that at any given time, for each subject, you have a small number of potential technologies to research, and instead of these being set according to where you are on some technology tree, they are somewhat randomised and somewhat dependent on your circumstances and what might be more necessary in them. For example, if you're at war a lot, you might get more weapons available to research, and also depending on the governing ethics you pick at the beginning of the game, but which can also change over the course of it according to your civilization's internal politics. The studio, Paradox, usually does grand strategy games like this, but unlike this, most of their games are set at different points in history. So Stellaris stands out among their work for being one that's set in space and some future instead, but also for being more approachable than most of their games. It does have a lot of systems to learn, but they're more reasonably straightforward. However, that's not the main thing that makes Stellaris more approachable than Paradox's grand strategy games. The thing with most of their games is they chuck you into a situation with several factions to deal with already, and so you almost have to learn it all at once. In Stellaris, you begin with your civilization alone, and you slowly discover alien life, and in the meantime you can learn the mechanics of handling your starships and building an economy. By default, there are already a number of starting civilizations to choose from, but a really cool thing about it is the way that you can almost make a new civilization from scratch. You choose the appearance and the traits of the species, and you also choose the way in which their government works. For example, you can choose to have a new leader in charge of the government every time the last one dies, like a monarchy, or you can have a small elite in charge, and what that works out to is having an occasional election with just about 4 candidates. Or you can have a democracy with frequent elections and a lot of candidates. There are also the governing ethics, which I keep on mentioning. They can be pacifists, or you can make them really militaristic and into conquering everybody. You can make them really into science and developing all the technologies and getting loads of robots, or you can make them really spiritual. And it's just really interesting to start up this civilization with its own characteristics and seeing it play out on the wider stage. However, these things you choose at the start of the game aren't actually fixed. There is a system of internal politics, which means that the way your government works can change over the course of the game. And you can also unlock genetic modification technologies, which means that you can create new versions of the species you start out with, or even new versions of the species that you conquer, even those that simply migrate into your society. Stellaris is set in one galaxy at a time, but it can get really crowded, or it can be really sparse depending on the options you pick at the start. You can have a spiral arm galaxy like your own, or an elliptical one, and you can even randomize different elements of it, like how many neighbours you have, or how many primitive civilizations there are. There are actually quite a lot of different setup options at the start, so between that and the kind of civilization you choose to play, it has massive replay value. As well as a set of difficulty settings, there is an option to have the difficulty scale up as the game goes on, which means if you're an experienced player, you can make the start of the game quite easy, so you can breeze through it nice and quick, and then get to the end game, which you may be less familiar with at the difficulty level you prefer. This is a game with a lot of menus in it, and we've yet to see whether the studio has managed to make them work well on console. However, it is a really good game on PC, so I'm really excited to see how well it fares. Another question to be asked about the console version is whether they're going to continue with the model from the PC version, where you have the base game and then you have a lot of different add-ons to choose from, or whether on the console version you'll get the add-ons by default. Experienced strategy gamers are likely to want as much content as possible, in my opinion. I'm looking forward to sharing more discussions, gameplays and reviews with you in the future. If you have your own thoughts on this game or this video, you can post them in the comment box. I'd love to hear from you. Also, hit the like if you enjoyed this and subscribe if you want to see more. Thanks for watching, and that's the talk.